Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm Matthew Mugno alongside my good pal Steve Murno. Just got back in time from Connecticut to watch Game One. This is our reaction right here. Rangers win. They come up with a big win after the long break. Erase those narratives. I think they've really erased that Vegas underdog narrative that they had coming into this one. It's been a long time since we've seen a game in the playoffs, man. Like a week.
Yeah, and we did it. It wasn't easy, but when is it ever easy with this team? Can you tell me? Even with the Capitals, yes, we swept the Capitals. You had, but game two, I almost had a heart attack. They come back 4-3. Game three, they're hounding the net. I mean, it's never easy with this team, but we're gonna jump in our raw reaction here. Let's do it. Let's talk some puck. Chives, your first reaction to Rangers winning 4-3.
I think it's that Panarin shot the puck. There was a chance he had where he ripped, wound up for the one timer uh, earlier in the game, and then he scores, and it kind of trickles by Anderson, but he shot first, and it was a creative 2-on-1 in the zone. There's a few numbers that told the story. I also think special teams was everything. Everybody said this is a special team series. The Rangers scored 2 power play goals in the first period. Mika Zibanejad, I said this. I didn't even say it on air, sadly, but I was talking to my brother on the phone. I said, I have a feeling this is going to be a big series for him. He was a crucial part of the team in 2022, specifically against Carolina. And I thought he really does have their number, and he did again today. This dates back to 2019 when the Rangers started to get competitive. He scored some big goals in the regular season against Carolina as well that year. And moving forward, like this has been kind of a known thing for a long time now. And I love the way the role players stepped up. Again, special teams, everything. They killed off 5 penalties. Svechnikov took a pretty stupid penalty in a moment there where they could have tied the game. And that sealed the deal with the Garden. They're 5-0. They're rocking. Steve-O, what were your takeaways?
I had a few takeaways, and I got to go with you. Special teams was huge in this one, and it hasn't bit us yet, but it will if we cannot stay out of the box. Now, this was a game we capitalized on. Hurricanes are the best power play in the league, even though I kind of feel like you should take that with a grain of salt. I feel like we're up there too, but if we're
Oh,
going
yeah.
technically with the stats, Hurricanes is 1, Rangers is 3 in the league. I don't want to repeat your narrative. My main narrative was block shots. In this game, the Rangers blocked 28 shots, Chives. And there's this big narrative. I've seen it. It's all over the internet. All the hockey guys are talking about this. Rangers kept Carolina to a season low 18 shots during this entire game. It's not that the Hurricanes weren't getting shots, because Hurricanes were getting shots left and right, especially last 10 minutes in the second when you take a look at the offensive ice time numbers. I mean, Carolina blew us out in the water in terms of those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
We were just blocking shots. We weren't allowing open lanes. And when we allowed open lanes, that's when they scored. That second goal, they came right in there. Third goal, they were clear open lanes. We got in there and we were very physical and we blocked shots. And for me, that's the narrative of game one here, Tribes. It was very key. And a lot of guys were throwing the body around, whether it was Lindgren, Truba,
Mm-hmm.
Keandre Miller, everyone was getting the body in front of the net. And that just makes it easier for our goaltender, Igor. And Igor had another great game. I mean,
Yeah.
awesome performance.
Well, I mean, to piggyback on the physicality too, I thought Goodrow and Truba specifically had 2 moments. Truba when he hit Jarvis after Kreider took the boarding penalty on him, and then Goodrow he hit Gensel in front of the net, and then like continued to chirp him after the play. The Rangers came out with energy that we didn't really see. We saw against Washington, like the Panarin hit on Oshie, but because the series was a sweep, it wasn't really necessary once they went to Washington to establish that presence, like to continue that. I thought obviously they played physically. Lafreniere had in that first series as well, but this felt different. It came from role players. I thought Truba really stepped up in that sense as well, and he's always been known to have that physical brand, specifically in his tenure with the Rangers. Steve-O, in terms of the physicality, did that shock you considering the pace of the game? I thought that shocked me a little bit because usually when you have more speed to a game, you expect maybe a little bit of less the hitting, but this is like Stanley Cup level hockey.
Yeah, it was, and these boys came out ready to go. I mean, Carolina had 28 hits, and we had 29. It was a very physical game. A couple questionable calls in there. You had Tony D come up and ram Cooley. I mean, that was one that was kind of debated. Our good old friend Steve Levy was debating with Subban and Messier on the during the intermission show. But the one I want to talk about was the call on Rempe in front of the net there. That was a BS call. I was not a fan of that. And you kind of felt, here we go. The tide's going to be shifting, and they're going to get the momentum off of that. And luckily, off a BS call, we didn't. We were able to kill that penalty, and Carolina went 0 for 5 tonight. Technically, it's 0 for 6 if you want to count the last 30 seconds of the game, but we're not really going to count that because that really doesn't count. And how about Mika? Oh, my goodness. Chives said it 2 episodes ago. It's clipped. If Mika is going, the Rangers are going to be hard to stop, and they are a Stanley Cup team when Mika's on, and we saw it. Mika's been fantastic. And I want to focus in for a little bit on, we go back to 2022. Carolina could not stop Mika. When Mika winds up from his cornerstone shot in the corner, his slapper, they could not stop Mika. Mika was really a force to be stopped in 2022. So we saw that 2 years ago. So Mika, if he's cooking, which he is, it's going to be really hard for Carolina, especially on 5-on-5. That was the line we were talking about. Yes, the Loft line, the Panarin line, they've been money all season long, but in those small slivers, when they go quiet, that Kreider and Zibanejad line was really silent for a lot of the season. And now, again, they have woken up. Forget Mika March, Chives. How about Mika May? You said that to me earlier. How about that?
Mika May, that's right. And I think, Ralstovic set up that first goal. Kreider's been on. He had 2 assists. And, I thought that, I think Carolina definitely knows they're contouring their defense, especially against Panarin, Lafreniere. So the fact they got on the board, huge. The fact that first line's going, it just adds depth to your team, right? When now you have to contain 2 top lines. I think from what Dan Rosen had written recently, Carolina is really looking to play a little more man on defense. And I think the Rangers are adapting like a chameleon to play a similar style. It was an exciting game overall. And I think to take game 1 on home ice was huge, really important. I think the way they started back up, the narrative was that with the time off that maybe that would affect them. Clearly did not. I think if there was any rust at all, shake it off. That's not the narrative in the series now. It's more about everything we saw today. Now, Steve-O, you mentioned to me before we got on here about the winning game 1, how important that is. And I think game 2, whatever's in store, is going to be important, but game 3 is going to be crucial, at least in the near future. But how important to you is winning game 1?
Game 1 is big, but it's not as big as you think it is. It's big for the winning team. I'm right with you. I think the 2 most important games is game 3 and game 5. Those are 2 crucial games. And game 1 is big, especially for the Rangers, home team. It's big because now all you got to, if you win the next one, you go on the road and you just have to win 1 in Carolina and to come back home and put yourself to serve it up on a nice plate. But Carolina, they got to win game 2 now because going back home, and they're a good team at home. They are a very good team at home. We've seen it these last few years. Going back 2 years ago, that's the most recent example. We lost game 3 and 4 in Carolina. So, or excuse me, game 1 and game 2 in Carolina. They were a good team. They're a tough team, and they play well at home. But game 1 is not as big as you think it is. We look at 2 years ago, there's all a bunch of recent examples, but round 1, we play Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh wins game 1. Who won the series? We did. Next series, we move on. We play Carolina. Carolina won game 1. Who won the series? We did. Our next series, we play Tampa. We won. We were celebrating. We were up 2-0. This is crazy. Look what's going on. We lost the series. So game 1, yes, it's big. It's big to get on the board. It's big, I think, momentumly, Chives, for a few players. Panarin, we want to get him cooking again. I cannot really, throw out there how much playing a team like the Washington Capitals really helped Panarin in round one. We saw it last year. Panarin had absolutely nothing, no goals, nothing against the Devils in round one. Playing a team like Washington, allowing him to cook, allowing him to do his thing, puts him better in a physical and mental space playing in round two. And again, game one is big. But game two, this is a team. This is a relentless team. Carolina Hurricanes were the favorite coming into the series, which I, we could. I know I'd love to get your opinion on this, but I could not believe that Carolina was a favorite, and they were like 66%. I don't pay any attention to those numbers; it was stupid. But ESPN had a 66% chance of winning the series, which I mean we could debate that, but the series already started. But this is a team that is relentless. They make adjustments, they fast, and they could burn you. They could burn you. So I want to gauge your opinion. Before the series started, Carolina was the favorite. ESPN again, they like to throw out stupid stats. 66% chance of winning the series. What'd you think of that beforehand?
So I think where that comes in, first of all, shout out Kobe. I hear him in the background over there.
Yeah,
But
he's excited.
I
Game one's got him pumped.
I would say the big thing with that is, the two aspects where I do understand. I don't necessarily agree. I think the line should be closer. I don't really understand everything about betting. I'm not a betting man, but um it should be a closer line, I would say. But I think it's more about the fact that they can come back at will. Like, I know the Islanders, we kind of wrote them off, but they still came back in those games. And I thought that was my fear, watching as the time's clicking down and they score. Aho, by the way, I just don't find him to be. Listen, I don't want to speak too soon. I've never found him to be like the it guy in the postseason. And I thought he kind of whiffed on that opportunity to cut the lead, and then Jarvis put it home. It happened to come out the other way to put up their third goal. Shesterkin's a monster in the playoffs aside from that, but yeah, I never found Aho really was like I just don't really see him being the guy to put in 8 in a series. Aside from that, that's a whole different tangent. It's their ability to come back. I think that makes them different. I think they're a better team than they were. They have a healthy Frederick Anderson. But all these things aside, I know you agree with me on this. Freddie doesn't really sell me either. So I do think it is questionable that they have them winning by, I would say, a little more of a significant margin over that 50-50 line. Like, I really think it's either should be 50-50 or should be a little bit in the Rangers' favor, Carolina's favor, however you see it. I think goaltending, special teams, that's it. And the Rangers were in a lot better of a position in those areas than Carolina, at least from game one showing. And they're going to make adjustments. Rod Brindamore is a fantastic coach. But, we haven't seen them at full force, and we saw how they played at home against the Islanders. The Rangers are a different team, though. They might be the least talked about President's Trophy winner I've ever seen. And with that, they were the best team in the regular season. That kind of has been talked over. They then sweep. That's kind of been talked over. Now they're not the favorite against Carolina. Fine. You want to play with that money? That's fine. I think they're in a good position in this series, and they jump out to a pretty solid start in game one to kind of disprove not having the energy coming into this game, disprove the rust, not being fully ready to go. So I think all those things aside, they took care of business at home. It's going to come down to when they play on the road. And I actually think I'm not a big Sean McDonough guy, but he did mention that on the broadcast. So it's really going to come down to, I think, what you said, game 3.
Key points that you touched upon there. Freddie Anderson, I'm right with you. I'm not sold on him. When I look at him, with an unbiased perspective, I don't think I don't. He hasn't shown me. Uh, he hasn't had like real success. In these last couple of years, you look back at his career these last couple of years, and it's just somebody who's could not stay healthy. And even when
Yeah.
he's gotten back on the ice, he's either one of two things have happened. He's had small success, but again, hasn't had major success. And he's had some setbacks, or he just can't stay healthy. So that's something that I think if the Rangers could exploit, this isn't somebody where you're sitting there going, wow, you're shaking. This is a Vesna caliber goalie who's been elite. This is somebody that the Islanders are the Islanders, and the Capitals are the Capitals. But at the end of the day, Igor's Igor and Freddie Anderson is Freddie Anderson. You know what you're getting there. So I think there's a couple things that the Rangers could exploit. And you saw that. You saw Panarin's goal. You saw Mika coming in. Oh, boy, Travis. Wouldn't you love to get Mika that hat trick? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how Burns kept that out. That was swift hat trick by inches. But again, that's a matchup right there, and I think to put on that to go back to that first goal, the Mika. I mean, how about Kreider just with that pass, knowing where Mika is? I mean, these guys have played together forever, and just knowing that Mika would be there, pass it in that area. And again, there's nothing Freddie Anderson could do to stop that. So I really think. Do you agree with me here that I really think that the Rangers could really exploit some stuff with Freddie Anderson?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, a lot of that passing stuff and this kind of that, Trocheck made the same pass that Kreider made, and then Kreider throws it over to Mika. That's kind of one of those like unstoppable goals. I don't think any of the goals the Rangers scored were necessarily like give me saves for Anderson. But I thought the Panarin shot squeaks through. Like those are plays where you say, all right, Igor Shesterkin is lights out when it comes to those opportunities on the other side of things. You look at the goals that have been scored against him in this postseason alone, the last 5 games. He hasn't really let in anything. The Carlson goal, okay, off a stick, changing direction. That was not the best to start a game. And the other being, I think, the goal in this game that changed direction. I believe it was not just once, but twice coming his way to tie it at 1. But other than that, these are not direct shots on net. This is not 2-on-1 and, both players are 30 feet across from one another making the pass. He has no chance. The Valaquette, the Royal Road, as he calls it, right? Like split down the middle. This was a kind of a turnover in the neutral zone. Panarin was the player that received the puck, and it wasn't on a passing play. It was like he carried it in, shoots it, and it squeaks through. That's the difference. And listen, it could be a game-by-game thing. I mean, we see it in the playoffs all the time with goaltenders adjusting and just finding a groove or getting hot. But it's those small aspects of the game that Anderson, I don't think he's at the caliber of Igor Shesterkin. And I think that is going to be a huge difference in the series. I mean, you could throw at Igor whatever you want. You could throw it in the kitchen sink. But if the Rangers can turn around and score on goals that, granted, credit Panarin that he shot the puck. They're looking for some quantity. It wasn't the most quality shot. I mean, he's got a beautiful shot. But all in all, that's a shot that I think if you are a top 3 keeper, top 5 keeper, you're likely making that save. That's all. And granted, that's not even, knocking Frederik Andersen. He is a really solid keeper. It's just the difference between Anderson's class and Shesterkin's class, I think, is a different level. And I think it's going to be something that for however long the series is, it's going to be a dominant factor because I also think Shesterkin made some saves that kept the Rangers in it.
He did for sure. Not to forget that Mika also had another attempt that would have been at the hat trick at the end of the first. How about that? If he put that in, would have had 3 goals in the first. But where he was coming up, it was 1-on-1 with him and Anderson, and he decided to pass it back for some reason to trying to get Vinny T, and that had no chance of working out right to the Carolina defender. But I want to ask you. This game, where do you think Carolina went wrong? Do you think they struggled defensively, or do you think their trouble was more in the offensive zone? What do you think?
That's a good question. I really think it was penalties, like the Kuznetsov high stick. I don't think, again, this was a game called the best by the officials. Like, I thought the puck over the glass was interesting, just that situation. I didn't think it was the Rempe call is just a Rempiation call. Like, it's just, really does feel like now it is because, it toes the line, but, a comparison, I thought the Leafs-Bruins Game 7 was called like a true hockey game. You can't blow the whistle in a game like that, I know. And this is a Game 1, a Game 1 versus a Game 7. But point being, sometimes you got to let the boys play. On the flip of the coin, though, like Kuznetsov's call, like that's blatantly a high stick. Um, I'm not a fan of how Slashing's called today, but vice versa. On the other side of things, Adam Fox, he got Svechnikov in the hands. Like they're gonna call that every time, and it's very frustrating. But it's the way it is. So I think on both sides of the coin, I think the players are actually the uh, responsible for how this. I thought game one was called for the most part. Like there were some questionable things for sure, but I think it really was Carolina struggling. Again, I think the Kuznetsov one sticks out because Svechnikov's penalty too late in the game, like that's an offense that could score with the goalie pull. They were really moving the puck around. They scored to cut it to one, and then he takes a. I mean, they get it kind of a call that I don't. I didn't think initially was going to go in their favor, the puck over the glass, and then he takes. Svechnikov takes a penalty 3 seconds later off the draw. Just like I don't know. I don't think mentally they were there in that respect, and discipline's going to be the other huge factor this series because that leads to the special teams, right? So, Steve, well, actually, I wanted to mention the other games too because I feel like we talk a lot about the Rangers and their games and the officiating, whether it's Rempe, the physicality, how the games are called, at least the five we've seen. Versus, Toronto game seven. I thought that was an awesome hockey game. And the difference to me is when the whistle's blown. And I know it's game seven, but that is frustrating to a fan. I think the flow of the game as well, just observing it, trying to like pick up everything about the how this specific game is going. You can't really get a gauge on it when there's constant whistles and slash tap on the hands. I really like game seven, but compared to the other playoff games, how do you feel like? Does that give you a perspective on how the series or the Rangers have been called so far?
Up to this point, I really don't think they've been horrible calls. Game one, game two, the Cap series. This one was a little questionable. There was maybe one or two calls in this game. Maybe I deviate a little bit more than you in terms of this game. I didn't think this game was that bad. Um, uh, the Kreider one, I'll give it to the refs. Yeah, I think that one. I think you had to call that one.
Yeah,
The Trocheck one too at the end of the game. I mean, Vinny T, you just can't do that at the end. That happens. He throws the puck over, and you knew they were going to call that because the original linesman, that was his original call. I was really blown away that they I think it was in the first period that they reviewed that the D'Angelo hit on Cooley. Initially, they called it a trip on Natchez, and
mm-hmm.
then they reviewed it, which normally you can't review it, but it wasn't a coach's challenge. It was the officials reviewing it, and that kind of took me a little bit by surprise because normally that's some that we saw on TV. You should see that and call that. That was an easy call. And for them to review it for like 5 minutes, I thought that was a little strange. You don't really see that in an NHL playoff game. But to echo your point, game seven last night, that was called like a real playoff game. That was a big boy game officiating. So credits for them. But you like to hope that as the series progresses, special teams has been the biggest talking point for us and in all of our games so far up to this point. And you like to think that they'll swallow the whistle on some of these calls as the series progresses. So I guess I don't. I'll differ from you a little bit, but I think you know by the time we hit the plane touches down in Raleigh, I expect I want to swallow the whistle on some of these easy calls because there was a lot of things that I feel like some of these calls wouldn't even be called in the regular season, let alone the postseason. So I do agree with you on that. Yeah, for sure.
He came around. Now, I think the big thing too, obviously Leafs Bruins, you can't avoid that conversation. Do you think they blow it up?
First of all, let's talk about the game. I want to get to that in a question. I want to get to your point because that's a great thing. We could sit here for days on that point. But that was one hell of a game. I mean,
Yeah,
first of all, I'm sitting here. I'm waiting for the schedule of our games, and NHL is giving us nothing. Of course, whoever's in charge of that, I got a bone to pick with them in the NHL office because that was ridiculous. But I mean, if we're gonna sit here and wait, and the NHL is gonna make pretend that our schedule is like national defense secrets, This better be one hell of a game 7. And it didn't disappoint. It was great. I had anxiety. I don't know about you. I kind of wanted Toronto to win. I wanted to approach it like, I'm just a normal hockey bystander, but I just didn't want. I don't like Boston. I don't like their city. I don't like their teams. I kind of want to see Toronto win, and you got the sense. But as soon as Boston comes right back and ties it up, and you knew as the longer this game goes on, the momentum shifts out of their favor.
Hmm.
You had Wall leave the game and not be able to start game 7. Samsona starts. He had a rough earlier going in the series, rock solid, but you just knew that luck wasn't gonna last forever, and you knew it wasn't going to. And I had a little bit of anxiety there, Chives, even though I didn't have an official leg in the race. I don't know about you. I want to feel how you thought leading up to the end there, but I was having a little bit of anxiety there because game 7, just so much at stake, man. It was crazy.
I've been to Toronto twice. I've been to Boston. Love the city as well. Don't love the fans though, right? I was in the New England region for long enough to meet Bruins fans, and they have the entitlement of like, oh, the Patriots and the Red Sox, and oh, we've seen so many championships in our lives. And well, I think especially last year, like they think that was supposed to be in some ways handed to them, or they thought they had it, and they didn't. So I was hoping by the time it got to overtime that we'd see them lose. But I think, man, it started with a lot of drama. It was like Marner is never really a playoff guy. He got called out by Biz on TNT. I talked about that on the pod already. William Nylander missed time. AM34, man, Matthews looked like he just wasn't skating. Like, I don't know what the injury was or if that's ever really going to be released, but he looked like he was playing on, like he wasn't skating, whatever the injury was. He looked like he was grimacing too. Like he just had no juice. And he still ended up with the assist on the Nylander goal. They score with less than 10 minutes ago, and they still, as you mentioned, they come right back, score. And as soon as Lindholm threw it off the boards, it kind of seemed pasta darting in. I was like, oh no, this is not good. They had to go back to Samsonov, of course, in true Leafs fashion. They go from Woll, who had a phenomenal 2 games. Suddenly he has a strange injury. That's it. All said and done. Another part of the story of Boston prevailing over Toronto continues. I think it's 6 straight game 7 losses for the Leafs. The last time they won the Cup, 1967, 6-7, 1967. Fun on the numbers there. But yeah, this is just important because to circle back to the Rangers before we wrap here, the Rangers will play the winner of the rematch of the Bruins and Panthers series. So really you do have truly, I think, the best teams in the East in the second round right now.
Yeah, and the reason I thought about it, and at first when Pasta puts it on, I'm like, ah. But when you think about it, I see you laughing. I know you had the same you had the same reaction. But after thinking about it, I'm okay with it because I do think that Florida is a better team than Boston. And if Boston's prone to these collapse, you saw the collapse last year. You call it a semi collapse. You're up 3-1 and you got to play a game 7. I think that since Boston is prone to these collapse, you got to feel good if you're Florida, and you know Boston is going to be tough, a tough outing. But I think Florida
Mm-hmm.
is even tougher. So you like to see that. If we want to get to where we want to be, we don't want our next opponent to breeze by anybody. And I think Boston is definitely a tougher matchup for Florida than Toronto. I think Toronto had a lot of things. And we're not going to jump fully into your question, but you asked me, do they blow it up? It's a tough one. Thank goodness I'm not in charge of that. Um, I'll give you a very quick answer here. Raw reaction. I would say yes, but it's a minor yes. It's tough to blow that situation up. You got this Marner, Tavares. What do you do with those pieces? I think realistically, Marner and Tavares, Chives are the 2 pieces that would probably most likely be moved. But they both have full no trade clauses in their contracts, meaning they would have to agree to waive that in order to be moved. So they basically have the right to veto a trade. And I just think it's so hard to see Tavares waiving his clause to leave Toronto. Marner too. For me, it's tough to envision Marner waiving his no trade clause. Matthews, obviously, I don't see him going anywhere. So yeah, I think you do make changes. Because again, we saw the Rangers last year, disappointing first round exit. They made changes even though they didn't have to. And with Toronto, it's just the same thing over and over and over and over again. You think something has to give at some point. So I think it's yes, but it's not. You're going to see changes for sure, but I don't think it will be any monster changes. Before we go, you want to respond? I'm curious to see what your raw reaction to that is.
Oh yeah, I think they yeah, you're right. It's funny because they mentioned John Tavares. I think because he chose there, like I don't think he waives anything. I think the younger guys know they're not playoff performers. I think they know. You could block out the noise all you want, but you're like a Mitch Marner knows he didn't perform well. He just knows that. And at the end of the day, they're regular season players. Called spade a spade, dude. It's been years of this. And the difference is this Rangers team has been to a conference final. The Leafs have not. The media peddles them out like Matthews has been to a cup final. He hasn't. Neither has Connor McDavid. I know we're talking about the best player in the world, potentially in terms of skill set ever. Point being, let's call it spade a spade. The Leafs are not a conference final. They're not even a team that's won a second round series, right? And when it came to the Capitals, that was the big joke. And they constantly were changing things around. Yeah, they kept Ovechkin. Yes, they kept Backstrom, some cornerstone guys, but that was it. I feel like it's different there though. Like Mitch Marner to me, I think if you go another season with this and they play the Florida Panthers in the first round next year, are we going to see a different result? At this point, how many times before it's evident this is who they are? This is their makeup. They're now 27, 28. They're no longer 19. This is who they are. So to me, I think they're going to move somebody. I think William Nylander at the tail end of that series did, and I'm not usually a huge fan of Nylander, just in terms of the whole money thing and whatever. But I think he proved that he could stay. I think Tavares, based on the contract captaincy, he'll probably stay. I I really think of the guys, it would be a Mitch Marner. I think he's gone. And I don't think a contender is going to pick him up. You saw how he played with zero physicality. Most contact he had was in the handshake line. I think that's it, man. I think the Leafs have to do something, and it might have to be radical.
Radical. And you brought up a good point comparing the Capitals to the Leafs. It's two tales of the story right there. The Leafs obviously had different expectations. They had aspirations of a championship. And in Washington, we did our Puck Talk preview. We both had Washington down below in the Metro, above Columbus. But Washington was a team that wasn't supposed to be there and got there. So them being a first round exit is not really anything, whoa. Toronto, especially what they've had going on these last few years with a first round exit again, it's just not anything you want to see. So, all good questions for the off season. Good thing that we don't have to cover anything of that. So, Game 2 will be coming up on Tuesday, Chives. One thing before we wrap up, one thing you want to see from the Rangers in Game 2.
Man, I mean, they had such a fast start, power play goals off the bat. I want to see, to me, it's let's see how this team responds, if they don't jump out to a 3-goal lead early. That played in their favor at home. And I feel like you made a good comparison before about game ones. We saw a triple OT game one. We saw overtime game one and kind of a boring game against Carolina in 22. We've seen game one against New Jersey where they clean the floor. We saw a game one against Tampa where they cleaned the floor. It's all different circumstances. I want to just see in that game, let's see 5-on-5. And I know that's been a conversation all year. I'm not saying it was bad. I'm saying like let's just see when they don't have the lead how they play against Carolina, because I think they're a team that Carolina, like, are they a team that when they have the lead, like they're just going to be merciless? It's going to be really difficult to come back. That's what I'd like to see, is how the Rangers in those situations where they may not be winning. Because right now they've won 5 games, all the credit in the world. President's Trophy coming off of that, 5 games in a row now in the postseason. Let's see. I mean, you got to figure it'd be great to win 16 in a row and win the cup, but that's probably not the case. So, Steve-O, what would you like to see?
I want to see us eliminate these odd man rushes and whatever. We saw Natchez get in there with a good opportunity. Set Jarvis. I really do think that Jarvis and Natchez are the two guys you got to watch. Anytime you have Gensel's fantastic in the playoffs. Aho, you mentioned, even though I'm with you on your point on Aho, they were a little quiet tonight. But I really do think Jarvis and Natchez are the two guys you got to watch, because they have done the most damage in round one, and they're just explosive players. I hate Aho. I don't hate Gensel. I respect him. I think he's a great player. But again, they have a lot of dogs in there. So the thing I want to see in game two, Chives, is we got to eliminate. We did a good job in this game, but we just got to eliminate Carolina from playing their game, because once Carolina gets to them playing their style, they are so good. I think they're one of, if not the best team in the league when they are set up and they're playing their game of style, which is defending that neutral zone. And when they're playing with the lead, that's tough. So we did a good job in this one. Obviously, I think the way you counteract that is scoring first and getting on the board, because when you score first and you have the lead, Carolina can't play that defending the neutral zone kind of game. And I think that kind of threw them off. And then the other thing is special teams and penalties. When Carolina is got to play, and we're a good shorthanded team. That doesn't mean I want to be out there on the penalty kill every 2 seconds. But I think when they're in the penalty box, and we capitalize, which we did tonight, 2 for 2, they can't play their game as well. So I think we did a good job neutralizing their style of play. So I want to see that in game two. Chives, final thought before we wrap this up.
I listen. If I was a betting man, I would throw a mortgage on an Alex Wenberg goal, man. I also thought his
It's
game.
coming.
I'm telling you, Roslovic played again. He had a phenomenal game, and these are two guys that were like very quiet after the trade deadline. Like I I know we throw the comparisons, and they're different players than Kopp, Vetrano, right? Like Strom, like some of the guys we picked up in the past. No, I think these two, like, they're playing such a subtle, great game. Wenberg, Kako, Cooley. I think that line's coming through next game. So that's final thought for Chives here.
Chip on Wenberg goal. I'm with you. It's coming. We said Capo is coming. Game 4, he netted that not even 2 minutes in. Chive said it with the Wenberg call. Game 2 coming up on Tuesday night. Rangers up 1-0 in the series. We'll catch you on the flip side to break it down and preview the shift to Carolina. That'll wrap us up here on Puck Talk CS. Always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.